Witkoffgate Exposed, the secret Trump-Putin deal over Ukraine. Witkoffgate Exposed. I'm about to explain what has never been explained before, at least not in English. The real reasons why Trump wants this peace deal. What is happening? Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, secretly coached the Kremlin on how to manipulate Trump, while Russia pushes a fake peace deal that serves only Putin and Trump. The plan designed to help Putin get what he failed to win on the battlefield in Ukraine. Meanwhile, Russia continues killing civilians in Ukraine every day. Today, I'll expose the scandal Witkoffgate. Hello, I'm Elena. Welcome back to my channel Enough of Propaganda. Please like, subscribe, share my videos. Let's make truth available for everyone. I was away for a long time, almost 3 months I was traveling in Europe. But now I'm back. And thank you all for supporting my channel, for staying with me, and for standing for democracy and for Ukraine. And yes, I have been in Strasbourg during my travels near European Parliament, and we will talk about this some other time. What is Witkoffgate and what actually happened? Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, this man, as proven by leaked phone calls with Ushakov, Putin's foreign policy aide, was betraying the United States and even betraying Trump himself. This is Witkoff's cold transcript published by Bloomberg. Witkoff discusses Ukraine plans with key Putin aide. You're welcome to read it for yourself. As I suggest always, you go to the source. You go to the original source. Since you probably have seen it already many times in many different channels, I won't go into details. This is the picture I took and from the article I just showed you, and highlight a few things. As you can see, Steve Witkoff, he literally coached Russian officials on how to manipulate Trump into accepting the Kremlin's so-called peace plan for Ukraine. I'm reminding you that Witkoff is completely incompetent. He knows nothing, zero, about the war in Ukraine, about Russian aggression in Ukraine. And Trump himself admitted that in the past, on camera. And yet Witkoff openly admires Putin, a bloody dictator and a war criminal. In this case, Witkoff didn't even bother to adopt the Russian plan, made up by Ushakov and Kirill Dmitriev, Russians. He just Google translated Russia's demands and presented them as an American proposal. And still, unbelievably, there is no investigation into Witkoff's actions on behalf of Russia. Witkoff is working for Russia. He betrayed his own president. And no investigations into Trump's actions. Even Trump is helping Putin and harming United States interests. Despite Witkoff's betrayal, Trump is sending him back to Moscow. He just sent him back to Moscow to negotiate peace for Ukraine. This is not diplomacy. This is collaboration with the aggressor and the war criminal Putin. If this is not working for Russia, I don't know what is. Please let me know your opinion in the comments. Now let's talk about something you perhaps didn't know. Why Trump wanted Russia's 28-point plan in the first place? Why was the Russian plan interesting for Trump and his incompetent administration? Why? When I will explain this to you, you will say, this is what it is about. I explain this more closely in this my Quora post, which is, I'll give you the link in the description. In short, according to Russian economist Professor Igor Lipsitz, this man, after failing to win on the battlefield, Putin is trying to buy control over Ukraine through a deal with Trump using frozen Russian assets. Lipsitz explained this scheme during the conversation and interview with Mark Fagin, a Russian lawyer. This is how the scheme works. Two funds of $100 billion each would be created from Russian assets frozen in the US and in the Euroclear, Belgium. Both funds would be managed by Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law. These funds would be opaque and under no obligation to spend anything on Ukraine. Yet they would generate around $6 billion in profit annually, half of which would go to the US, in practice to Trump's circle. In return, Moscow gets relief from any future reparations or responsibility. We gave you $200 billion, what more do you want? Fagin reminded that Ukraine's real damages far exceeded $300 billion of Russian frozen assets. Lipsitz explained that only a court or an international body like the UN could issue a legally binding assessment. But no such mechanism exists today, and there is nobody to enforce this mechanism as well. Any lawsuits would take decades, and in the end, a court could decide that because $200 billion was already transferred to the funds, those two funds I was talking about, and another one I will tell later, Ukraine has no further claims against Russia. Europe would have no control of these funds either, as Euroclear would hand the money over with Russia's consent to avoid US sanctions. So the key here is that Russia will consent to do that. Why? Because Putin knows this money is kind of lost anyway. As a result, Russia effectively pays nothing. It simply buys itself a favorable peace with money Putin already considered lost. Ukraine received neither reconstruction, nor reparations, no guarantees, only vague promises of investments that would have to be begged from Kushner. Lipsitz warns that the plan turns Ukraine into a bargaining chip between the US and Russia. The remaining frozen Russian assets could then be moved into yet another opaque US-Russian fund, controlled by Trump and Putin circles. That would be about $150 billion. And Europe also will be left with nothing. This is actually, by the way, the Chernobyl, Ukrainian city which was bombed recently on November 19th in Ukraine. And Ukrainians mourn the losses of their innocent lives daily, thanks to Putin. And thanks to Trump, Witkoff, and everybody who supports Putin. The conclusion, Lipsitz stresses it's catastrophic. Russia gets a profitable peace, the US Trump circle makes money, and Ukraine is left without compensation for the destruction and without any real guarantees for the future. And I agree with Professor Lipsitz. I'm former economist myself. It's all about money first. The reason Trump was so interested in Russia's 28-point plan in the first place was money, and the opportunity to claim that he had stopped another war. So go ahead and give Trump the Nobel Peace Prize already, and don't forget to bury the Epstein files while you are at it. The Russian plan meant to deceive, not to end the war. This is my video about the Istanbul agreements, so-called agreements of 2022. Some people say that the Russian plan is worse than the Istanbul proposals of 2022. That's not correct. In some parts, it's actually much better. But this is not the point. There is absolutely no reason to waste time discussing any peace plan with Putin. Period. As I plainly explained in my video, Wrong Goals, Putin doesn't want peace. He cannot have peace. His survival depending on continuing this war. So you're welcome to watch this video and understand it more closely if you still didn't understand it until now. Even if Ukraine signed all 28 points today, Putin will never sign it and he definitely wouldn't obey it. The plan doesn't give Putin any of the goals of his so-called special military operation. As Russia called bloodiest war in Europe since 1945, it started there. Putin loses this war, and he likely will lose power. And if he loses power, he may lose his life. It is highly likely. But Putin will continue killing Ukrainians and Russians until he's stopped by force. And he's already backing out of it, as we will talk later. Ukraine's reality every day is survival. With help of the free world, Ukraine can't stop Putin. Without it, Ukraine will still fight and win, but with far more casualties. Ukrainians don't want to die for Russia's imperial fantasies. They will continue defending themselves. This peace plan simply is another tactic to delay Russia's defeat. Another stick thrown to the foreign dogs to delay aid to Ukraine. It's like when your dog is chewing on your shoe, you throw him a stick so he gets distracted. From that and from the Epstein files, for example. The shortest road to peace is simple. More weapons for Ukraine, more sanctions for Russia. This is not a game. People are dying every day. War in Ukraine is not a tango or business transaction. Real people are dying every day. Russia bombs civilians and children daily because Putin can't achieve his goals on the battlefield. He tried. He's doing everything he can, but he can't. Can't win on the battlefield for 11 years. Over 11 years. This is November 19, 2025. Russians strike on 2 apartment buildings in Chernobyl, killed at least 35 people, including 6 children, and wounded at least 94, with some people still unaccounted for. There is a clear aggressor, Russia, and there is a clear victim, Ukraine. So enough of those pathetic attempts to equate them. I am not Putin or Trump. I am proving what I say. This is a strike on Zaporizhia on November 20th. Last night, Russia whacked Ukraine civilians again. Everything I say, I can prove. This is why I made these videos. It's a video proof. And there is a whole playlist important to know about the war in Ukraine, for example, which will explain to everyone how this war started, why Russia is the aggressor. If, in case, somebody of new viewers of my channel doesn't know it yet or want to verify it for themselves. To every video I provide the list of the sources, unless it's my own thoughts, completely my own, then and my own experience as a person who lived in 2 dictatorships in the USSR and Russia. So let's talk about my peace plan, the only honest one. Here it is. Russia leaves all the territories of the independent country of Ukraine, moves its troops back to international recognized borders of 1991, which Russia agreed upon actually, and Putin himself agreed upon. Russia reduces its army, gives up nuclear weapons, pays reparations, and punishes its war criminals, starting with Putin. Putin's going to hug. And Russia writes into its constitution that it must not attack other countries. Remember, Putin cannot win in Ukraine, so he kills Ukrainian civilians every day instead. This must stop. We must not reward the aggressor or the loser of this war, Putin. And don't forget, Russians are dying too. I don't care for Russian Nazis, but Russian civilians also suffering and so on. And every civilian death is a tragedy, no matter what side they are on. And I want to remind everybody, especially to Ukrainians, the West cannot count on Trump. Forget the idea of US or NATO security guarantees. Thanks to the Kremlin's puppet Trump acting as the so-called leader of the free world, NATO has become useless. Trump, like Putin, lies constantly and breaks his own promises whenever it benefits him. United States may not defend anyone it promised to defend. It is no longer a reliable partner in any way. These videos are filmed by Russians, by the way. So stop wasting everyone's time on fake Russian peace plans and stop wasting Zelensky's time. Fly here, fly over there, talk to Russians. Ukraine is fighting a war for survival and it's suffering daily attacks on its economy and infrastructure, which Russia has failed to destroy despite going after every single knot of that infrastructure to leave people in Ukraine without heat, without electricity in winter. So far, Ukraine is standing and defending and their infrastructure is surviving. But how long that's gonna take? European Parliament pushes for Ukraine security and reparations. The European Parliament adopted a resolution demanding that the European Union will be allowed at the negotiating table on Ukraine and that Russian assets will be transferred to Kiev. The documents call for security guarantees for Ukraine, non-recognition of Russian-occupied territories, and the principle of nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. I agree with that. It proposes creating a reparations credit mechanism using frozen Russian assets, while sanctions against Russia should not be lifted until a peace agreement is reached. The European Union is also urged to increase pressure if Moscow refuses to negotiate, though implementing the resolution depends on strong political will. And this is Kaya Kallas.
But security guarantees to Ukraine do not change the fact that the threat really here is Russia. In last 100 years, Russia has attacked more than 19 countries, some as many as 3 or 4 times. None of these countries has ever attacked Russia. So in any peace agreement, we have to put the focus on how to get concessions from Russian side, that they stop aggression for good and do not try to change borders by force. There are rarely wars in the world where the situation is so clear-cut as it is here. We have one aggressor and one victim. The focus should be on what Russia, the aggressor, must do, not what Ukraine, the victim, must sacrifice.
You can watch the full video in here. Putin is out, by the way. In his speech, Putin has already abandoned the so-called peace plan. He spouted his usual lies claiming that the Ukrainian government is illegitimate and that he can achieve victory on the battlefield. None of it is true. The fact is clear. Putin doesn't want peace. It's all just delay tactic. And Trump and his most incompetent administration in US history fell for it. Again. This is my final warning to you. Putin clearly stated that Russia has no end, and wherever the foot of a Russian soldier has once stood, there is Russia. Hello, Russian Alaska, by the way. How are you doing? Are you ready to bend your knees to your Russian Tsar? Bottom line, help Ukraine stop Putin, or your country could be next. Thank you for watching. Have a great day or evening, and see you later.